Ah, the Phantom Menace. How high our expectations were for thee. Needless to say, not everyone was enamored with George Lucas' return to the Star Wars universe. So here are our 8 steps for fixing the Phantom Menace. Step 1. Make Anakin older. There's no reason that Anakin has to be a 9-year-old child when we first meet him. In fact, it's extremely detrimental to his character. Up to this point, Darth Vader was one of the greatest villains of all times, yet this film transformed him into a chubby-cheeked, yippee yelling child.
Yippee!
If he was older, more weathered, and more serious, then our impression of Anakin Skywalker wouldn't be left scarred. Step 2. Make Anakin a more nuanced character. As was mentioned in Step 1, Anakin is far too cheery and happy in this movie for us to ever believe he could become Darth Vader. His situation should be kept in mind when developing his character as a youth. Being a slave should have had a very detrimental effect on him. If it was so easy for him and his mother to get by, as we saw in this film, then he would have no reason to want freedom as badly as he does. If he suffered as a slave, then his character progression would make sense. We'd understand why he's so desperate to free himself and his mother. Then, he could be depicted as a good person, but one who has grown up with the belief that the ends always justify the means. He would always be at odds with the Jedi Council because he would suggest courses of action that he sees as necessary, but that they see as wrong. It's hard to imagine him being able to commit the atrocities he does later on in the series, if he's such a perfect little boy with a perfect mother and a perfect mentor who's always trying to help others. No doubt he was depicted that way with the purpose of making us like him, and making us lament his turn to the dark side. But he can be flawed and still be likable. Step 3. Make Darth Maul the main villain of the entire trilogy. His fearsome looks alone were enough to make Darth Maul one of the most intriguing and memorable villains in the Star Wars universe. Sadly, they used him up far too quickly, and killed him off without any significant character development. Darth Maul should have survived the end of the Phantom Menace, and taken the place of both Dooku and General Grievous. Darth Maul could have been a clone of Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas, that Palpatine created to agitate the galaxy into war. First, he has him go and impersonate the Jedi, ordering the creation of a clone army. Then, when the actual Sifo-Dyas is killed, Palpatine has him tattoo his face so that he is unrecognizable. He then trains him as his apprentice. Although average clones cannot gain the Force powers of their host, Palpatine would have used his abilities to connect him to the Force when he was created. Darth Maul then does Palpatine's dirty work throughout the rest of the trilogy. He kills Qui-Gon at the end of the Phantom Menace, and Obi-Wan injures him, cutting off his legs, but he manages to escape. For the rest of the trilogy, Obi-Wan has to work hard to keep his hatred in check, and not let his fights with Darth Maul become about vengeance. Each time they face each other, though, it feels more and more personal, until finally, in the third film, Obi-Wan gives into his anger momentarily and kills him, which causes Anakin to question everything Obi-Wan had taught him about being a Jedi, and is an integral part of his descent to the dark side. Step 4. Make the stakes of this film directly related to the plot of the entire trilogy. The story of the Phantom Menace is only vaguely connected to the events of the other prequel films. In fact, we barely ever see Naboo or the Gungans again, and Episode 2 takes place an entire decade later. The only element of the Phantom Menace that was significant to Attack of the Clones was the fact that some planets in the Republic were unhappy with the government. The story of Naboo could have been skipped entirely, or combined with the events on Geonosis, making the struggle that we see in this film the inciting incident of the Clone Wars. They could have revealed in the Phantom Menace the existence of the Clone Army, and the movement of the Separatists, and this would have allowed for the Clone Wars, as well as Anakin's relationship with Obi-Wan, and his descent to the dark side, to be depicted thoroughly in the other 2 films, rather than only showing us the very beginning and the very end of the conflict, the very beginning and the very end of Obi-Wan and Anakin's friendship, and Anakin's abrupt change from a perfect little child to a child-murdering personification of evil. Step 5. Develop the concept of the Jedi more fully. While the Jedi have the potential to be fascinating characters, and no doubt they are just that in the mind of George Lucas, he leaves far too much to the imagination in the prequels. The idea that the Jedi were not everything that they thought they were, that their powers weren't as great as they claimed, that their teachings were flawed, and that they caused their own destruction in the way they trained Anakin are all hinted at, but never fully developed on screen. Not to mention the conflict between Qui-Gon and the Jedi Council, which insinuated that not all Jedi saw eye to eye, but which was completely dropped with his death, and never referenced again, not even by his Padawan Obi-Wan. All of these aspects of the mythos should have been front and center in the prequel trilogy, starting with this movie. Step 6. Eliminate Jar Jar and the Gungans from the script. It seems as though there is a point between making A New Hope and making The Phantom Menace where George Lucas lost touch with what makes comic relief characters funny, if he ever had a firm hold on the concept to begin with. While even the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi were pointing toward a tragic loss of seriousness, The Phantom Menace crossed the line from humor to stupidity. Jar Jar Binks is the most egregious example of this. Through him, the movie provides us with potty humor, slapstick humor, and racism. A character that has to tell the audience he's intelligent because he has the capacity to talk, as he does in this movie, is not a fitting character for the Star Wars universe. And if George Lucas wanted to add moments of levity to the film, he should have done so in ways that didn't ruin the tone of the story, and that didn't jarringly break up the tension, such as Jar Jar scenes in the pod race and the Battle of Naboo did. Step 7. Don't make a big deal out of characters or events that have no significance to the actual plot of this movie. This is a big issue that many prequels have. They focus on moments that are callbacks to events that haven't even happened yet, or they focus on characters that have no bearing on the plot, simply because they were in the original movies. The scene where R2-D2 was introduced is one such example. The music swells when his face comes into view, and then the Queen asks for his designation. The only reason for this is because the audiences have known R2 for 2 decades, and he's significant to them. He is not, however, significant to the story, even if they did decide to give him a scene where he saves the ship.
That little droid did it! Right past the main power drive!
Another example is the scene where R2-D2 meets C-3PO for the first time. There is no reason presented in this movie for why that moment is special, or even why it matters at all, but the music would make you think that it's one of the most important scenes in the entire film. A third example is Greedo. In a huge galaxy full of billions of people, why is it that 2 of the characters introduced in the first film, Darth Vader and Greedo, who have no connection to each other at all, must be childhood friends? That moment, and all the other, "Oh look, someone / something I recognize because I've seen other Star Wars films before," moments are distracting and grating. Step 8. Replace George Lucas as director and writer. They say that a good director can get an amazing performance from a bad actor. Somehow George Lucas manages to do the opposite. He gets stilted and stiff acting out of some amazing actors, not to mention the unnatural and awkward dialogue he wrote for the script.
The Queen is worried. Her people are suffering, dying. She must convince the Senate to intervene.
Finding someone else to help bring George Lucas' vision to life would have been one easy step towards turning The Phantom Menace into a high-quality film. What do you think would have improved The Phantom Menace? Or, if you liked it as is, what was your favorite part of the film? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe if you liked this video. Check out my website, qjmartin.org, my Twitter, @qjmartin_author, and email me at the address qj@qjmartin.org. Thanks for watching.